Welcome back to Yahoo Finance Live. I'm senior health reporter Anjalee Khemlani. As part of Yahoo Finance's week-long healthcare special, we're looking into regulation in healthcare. The Food and Drug Administration finding itself in a number of new and ongoing efforts to regulate and improve medicine in the U.S. Whether it's addressing AI or working on more robust evidence generation after approval of a drug. Joining me here now to peel back the layers in the future of medicine is FDA Commissioner Dr. Robert Califf. Commissioner, so good for you to join us today. This is something that I know you've been talking about for a while, and certainly all year. Looking at that robust evidence generation needed, there are definitely new areas of medicine that we are seeing come out. For example, the weight loss drugs that people are so focused on, Alzheimer's disease drugs, as well as new innovation areas like CRISPR that we've just seen approval for over the pond. So I just wonder, with all of this going on, how do you think about the need to look back after approvals and what is needed to make sure that these medicines are safer for us?
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question. It's good to be with you. I prefer to call it looking forward rather than looking back, because the way our system works, we have very robust clinical trials that are done to get a drug on the market. And by the way, I'd put high-risk devices in the same category, where you got to show that your product produces a health benefit that exceeds the risk for a particular population under particular circumstances. But after that product gets on the market, there is no evidence generation system like what we have in the pre-market phase. And yet we have all these questions that are still on the table that need to be answered. The weight loss drugs may be the easiest to talk about right now, because everyone, I think, recognizes there's so many questions. Who really should be treated? Are there subpopulations where the benefits outweigh the risks? What are the right doses, really, out of all the possible doses? You have to prove you at least have a dose to get on the market, but you don't have to prove you have the best dose at that point. So many questions left to be answered. This is not directly in the FDA's regulatory control. And so what we're doing is more saying we need a system to do this. FDA plays a role, but so do many other parts of the government and the private sector.
So who do you need to help make this happen? And what do you anticipate the pushback could be from companies? Because this is adding just another layer of administration for them, whether it's sponsoring the trials or sponsoring studies, and really investing in that follow-up.
Well, we got to parse that out a little bit. So first of all, your presumption is that companies are going to pay for these post-market studies, and companies certainly do. But we all know that the metric for a company doing a post-market study is a net present value calculation. It's not a public health question. And so there's a big issue as to whether public funding should be used for some of these studies, because the answers are so critical to federal agencies like CMS, who, after all, have to pay a big part of the revenue that these companies make. I'd also say there's some circumstances where FDA does have jurisdiction because there's a safety issue. And if we look at the what's going to be a real amazing increase in gene editing therapies that are about to hit the markets, we're going to need long-term follow-up in those patients, because no one knows what the potential impact of things like off-target effects might be. So that's a case where the industry does need to pay for it in return for getting the product on the market. But for a lot of this, it's more of we all have a stake in this, and we need to figure out how to put together a system that generates the best evidence. And don't forget that if you prove that your product is better than the competitors, that's a pretty good market.
It certainly is. I also wonder about another area that you've talked about, and this kind of plays on the idea that, the FDA has so much more that it has to look at with all the innovation coming out. AI, for example, I know you've talked about the harms that it has caused in the past, but you've also been looking at approvals for uses, especially in the med tech space. What are you thinking about how the FDA needs to think about what is coming down the pike? You have a background at Alphabet, so you've definitely seen what's been going on behind the scenes.
Well, it's really exciting. But like most major breakthroughs that are exciting in medicine or society, there's also a downside. So we have to keep both in mind. Also, remember that we've already put through the system hundreds of devices with AI algorithms built into them. So we have experience. And actually, when AI is used for prediction, which is the biggest use right now, we have a regulatory scheme, which I think is pretty good. The system needs to get better because one of the really key things about AI algorithms is if you put them out in a clinical system and don't keep tuning them up, they don't work as well over time and may actually trend in a very negative direction in terms of their capability of predicting. So we need a system where, again, that post-market phase becomes absolutely critical in getting it right. But the thing I think we're all struggling with is generative AI, which is a new thing. It's something we don't really know how to regulate at this point, but we have some pretty good ideas. It does fall back on some of what I said already. Someone's got to keep an eye on it. But this is so explosive and potentially helpful, but also potentially detrimental. This is really going to take an ecosystem approach. We're going to need the academic medical centers and other entities to work together to have a system of governance that's put into place. There'll be a lot more to come on this. We're working on it right now, but we're going to need to work this out.
Definitely. Generative AI is certainly on everyone's mind, and we'll wait to see what you have for that. Meanwhile, I want to give you a chance to talk about Dr. Janet Woodcock. I know she's retiring at the end of the year. Principal Deputy Commissioner, really an important role, pivotal role during the pandemic, but also leaving you with, as well as leaving a wealth of institutional knowledge. What is the FDA going to have to do to fill that role?
Well, as you might imagine, if you know Janet, you know this wasn't a surprise. We've known about this for a while. So we've been working on it, and we've got a good plan to fill those roles. I think what Janet has not gotten enough credit for, which you're alluding to, is that she actually has done more things than you could ever even imagine within the FDA with a tremendously positive impact. If you just look at what she's done in leading the reorganization of the food side and the inspectorate at the FDA over the last year, it's really remarkable. But trust me, we've got a plan. Janet, of course, has been involved in the plan. She wouldn't leave without leaving things in good hands. But make no mistake about it, we're going to miss Janet. Uh, she's really put in 4 decades of work at the FDA, and she's so trusted both inside and outside the FDA for sound decision making and thoughtful regulation.
Absolutely. And they're with you through your 2 terms in the FDA. Well, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Robert Califf, FDA Commissioner.
It's good. Please take care.